Hello and welcome to Video Free in Feeling Good About How We Feed Our Babies, craft and a chat for parents and children. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about my research. So as I said, my research looks at feelings about how babies are fed. There are lots of different ways of feeding babies. Some parents breastfeed their babies, some express breast milk or use infant formula to feed their babies with a bottle or a tube. And lots of parents use a mixture of different ways of feeding their babies. Feeding babies is often lovely, but sadly, parents, particularly mothers, can end up feeling bad about how they feed their babies. Research shows that however a mother feeds her baby, she can end up feeling bad. Some mothers may end up feeling guilty or ashamed. Often, we end up feeling like we're being judged, or as if we have to explain or defend our feeding decisions. My research uses philosophy to work out why this happens and to try to help. I think a lot of these problems come from issues in how we think about motherhood. One problem is excessive demands for justification. Sociologist Elizabeth Murphy recorded interviews with pregnant women discussing their plans about how to feed their baby. She argued that whether they planned to breastfeed or use infant formula, the women seemed to feel required to justify their decisions, defending themselves against an implicit charge of being a bad mother or wife. I argue that we mistakenly treat mothers as if they have a defeasible moral duty to breastfeed. What does this mean? Well, if something is my moral duty, then I'm required to do it. If I don't, I should feel guilty and others can blame me. A defeasible duty is just a duty that can be outweighed if there's good enough reason. When I have a defeasible moral duty to do something, then I have a moral duty to do it unless the defeasible duty is outweighed. For example, I have a duty to turn up to lectures to teach my students. But this duty is defeasible. It can be outweighed. If I fall over and break my foot on the way to the lecture, I'm allowed to go to the hospital instead of the lecture. Now, if I don't do something that I have a defeasible duty to do, people can demand that I justify my behaviour. So if I don't turn up to the lecture, my students can email me asking where I was. If my justification is not good enough, maybe I just wanted an extra hour in bed, then they can blame me and I should feel guilty. When we ask mothers to justify why they aren't breastfeeding, we treat them as if they have a defeasible duty to breastfeed. I don't think that mothers do have a duty to breastfeed, even a defeasible one. Unfortunately, I think that other confusions in our thinking about motherhood can make it feel as if we have to say that there's a defeasible duty to breastfeed. Breastfeeding mothers also end up feeling like they have to justify their behaviour. People often say that breastfeeding after a certain age is wrong or selfish, portraying it as unnecessary. Many people still complain about women breastfeeding outside the home. There are also lots of barriers to breastfeeding. Women don't get the support they need at the right time, or breastfeeding is treated as an optional extra. For example, a breastfeeding mother who needs to go to hospital might have to fight for what she needs to be able to continue to breastfeed. So it can be really tempting to respond to this by framing breastfeeding as a moral duty, as something that you have to do in order to be a good mother. If I have to breastfeed, then I can't be criticised for breastfeeding in public, and it's much easier to demand support for breastfeeding. But that throws mothers who feed their babies in other ways under the bus. Even worse, the same mother might both breastfeed and use formula. So in order to defend her breastfeeding and get what she needs to breastfeed, she has to frame herself as doing something wrong by using formula. So how do we fix this? We need to be able to recognise that neither breastfeeding nor using infant formula requires justification. So there's nothing weird or immodest about breastfeeding. And someone for whom breastfeeding is important isn't just being silly or awkward, because there are lots of good reasons to want to breastfeed. But that doesn't mean that everybody has to breastfeed, or that breastfeeding is a duty. Parents should be supported to feed their babies in the way that works best for their family. Thanks for listening. If you want to know more about my research, there are also some posters, a website, and an animated video to explore. You can find these in the Find Out More About the Research column. Go to video 4 to find out how to hang up the decorations. If you've used paint or glue to decorate your hearts, you may need to leave them to dry before this step.